The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
If we go too fast, any recovery will be hindered.
Tonight on Politics Now, we are improving, but not enough. That was the COVID message from Governor Sisolak this week, plus his plea for Labor Day weekend. From marriages to pardons to voting, I'll explain all the ballot initiatives that'll be on the November ballot this year. Plus,
I think it's a wonderful thing that we get more eligible people to vote.
DNC Chairman Tom Perez tells us about their voter outreach efforts in Nevada and why he thinks mail-in voting is all about giving people options.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Clark County erased one restriction for local restaurants, but most of our COVID-19 precautions are staying in place. Thanks for joining us. I'm Orko Manna. Governor Steve Sisolak also pleading with Nevadans to be safe this holiday weekend.
Please help us get through this next weekend. We had a major setback after Memorial Day weekend. We had another one after the 4th of July. And this is our third big one in the summer.
As for those restrictions, nothing will change for bars, but restaurants that have bar-style countertops, like sushi restaurants or breakfast places, can reopen those countertops. As far as other restrictions, the governor says he's taking it one step at a time.
If we go too fast, any recovery will be hindered. And things like conventions won't just be canceled this year, they'll be canceled next year too, and the year after that. And we will lose convention business. We can't afford to do that.
The number of cases has been declining, but the number of deaths has been steady. Those deaths are people that contracted COVID-19 up to 5 weeks ago, and the state's percentage of tests that are positive has not started to drop yet. Hundreds of Nevadans get a reprieve for a month and a half as Governor Sisolak extended a statewide moratorium on residential evictions. The extension was for 45 days from this past Monday. The whole point is to keep people in their homes and to prevent an eviction crisis in Nevada, but the state and its counties have a lot of work to do.
I'm basically almost 2 months behind.
Armando Gomez is one of the hundreds of thousands of Nevadans struggling to pay for housing amid the COVID-19 pandemic. His work hours have been slashed and what he is making doesn't cut it.
Not enough to pay rent.
Despite his apartment complex doing what they can, Gomez is still worried he'll get evicted.
They point me to some programs and that will cover a little bit of my problem. They have been helpful, but it's not enough.
I do understand the frustration.
That's why Governor Steve Sisolak is extending Nevada's eviction moratorium by 45 days. The extra time will allow counties to continue paying out short-term rental assistance to landlords, and an additional $10 million will be added to the program.
I know our local governments are working hard to get these funds out the door to landlords to keep qualified tenants in their homes.
The 45-day extension will also give courts more time to set up a new mediation system between landlords and tenants, which should be up and running before the end of September. And the state will continue to work through the huge backlog of unemployment claims.
We do not want Nevadans getting evicted while awaiting a determination of their case.
This break, it helps us, but still is not enough. You need a job.
Gomez says it's too little, too late, and now he's planning to move to Arizona in search of work that will pay his bills in full.
There's no options here.
In terms of processing unemployment claims, Governor Sisolak says a new identity verification system should help Dieter get benefits to people faster, and he adds that 5,000 claims are expected to be approved this week. Turning now to the November election, we'll have 5 proposed amendments to the Nevada Constitution that qualified for the November ballot. Remember, voters have to approve all of these twice. So let's take you through some of them and explain what they are. Question 1 removes the Board of Regents for the university system from the state constitution. That would give the legislature more control over the state's colleges and universities. Right now, making a change means they have to go through the 5-year process of amending the Constitution. The yes on question 2 people actually held a launch for their initiative this week. Question 2 would enshrine the right to same-sex marriage in the state's constitution. Same-sex marriage is legal nationwide, but the existing language in Nevada's constitution recognizes marriages only between a man and woman. This amendment also says that religious organizations and the clergy do have the right to refuse to perform a marriage. Question 3 would change the State Board of Pardons. That board is made up of the governor, attorney general, and Supreme Court justices. They would be required to meet 4 times a year. The amendment would also remove the governor's ability to veto a decision all on his own. Question 4 would enshrine the existing Voters' Bill of Rights into the Constitution. Right now, that exists in state law. There is no question 5, so we skip to question 6. This is the second go-round for the 50 by 30. That would amend the state's constitution to require utilities to generate or acquire at least 50% renewable energy by 2030. Voters passed the measure in 2018, so this is its second approval. Governor Sisolak signed this into state law, but enshrining it in the Constitution makes it harder to change down the road. The pandemic makes in-person voter contacts harder for campaigns to do, so how are they compensating for it? John Langler asked Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez about their Nevada campaign efforts.
What can the DNC do? What can the organization do to get to voters when, based on the pandemic, you're not really supposed to have a lot of interaction, period?
We've had our virtual clipboards out for some time, and we've been able to connect with voters. The voter registration advantage continues, not only in Clark County, but across the state. You look at the progress we're making in Washoe County also. And the beauty of Nevada is really a model for the nation. This pandemic has certainly changed the nature of how you interact with voters. But over the course of the last 6-7 years, the state party, starting with Senator Reed and continuing on, the state party has built a remarkable infrastructure, and we're proud to work together. We are an every year, everywhere party in Nevada, and so we're not meeting people for the first time. We're no longer you show up every 4th October talking about voting to people. The investments that have been made in organizing over a period of years are serving us well in recent years, and I think will continue to serve us well as we head into this election cycle.
Nevada has mail-in voting this year, which is not normal. It's new for us here. I know it's in other states. From firsthand experience, it's up in Washington State, but the Trump campaign thinks this is a situation that's ripe for fraud. What do you say?
Well, I say that's hogwash. The vote by mail, it's safe, it's secure. Donald Trump's been doing it for years. His wife does it. Virtually his entire cabinet votes by mail. You came to Las Vegas after a distinguished career in Washington State. They've been doing it for some time out there. Guess what happens with vote by mail, whether it's Washington State, California, Arizona, Oregon, Colorado, now Nevada? Guess what happens? It increases turnout. I think it's a wonderful thing that we get more eligible people to vote. And what you have this year, and again, NevadaVotesEarly.com is the one-stop shop to learn more about it. You have options.
Nevada is, in terms of the people in the top elected positions, a Democratic state, governor, Senate, Congress, etc. But from a national standpoint, from a presidential race standpoint, is Nevada still a battleground? How concerned are you that the state is vulnerable to the president's campaign?
We're proud of the progress we've made in recent years to not only elect Democrats, but to have the first, for instance, majority female state legislatures, as we do in Nevada. Nevada should feel very proud about that. And we were proud to be part of that team. At the same time, Nevada will continue to be a battleground. We take nothing for granted. We are always mindful that we have to earn people's votes.
We put more of that interview with Tom Perez on 8newsnow.com. Just look for the political news tab. Allegations of abuse of power and conflicts of interest. Up next on Politics Now, the I-Team digs into formal charges from the Judicial Ethics Commission against a sitting Las Vegas judge.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
A Las Vegas judge is formally accused of improper conduct and using her power on the bench inappropriately. This is a story the I-Team has been following, and Vanessa Murphy has the latest.
Judge Melanie Tobiason is accused of abusing her power, letting family issues influence her conduct and judgment, and failing to disqualify herself when there may have been a conflict of interest on the bench. She faces 8 counts from the Nevada Commission on Judicial Discipline in this formal statement of charges. While charges from the commission won't land her in jail, they could get the judge kicked off the bench. In 2018, Judge Tobiason shared her story with the I-Team.
I would lose my job over this. I would lose my freedom over this. I would lose my life over this.
She said she was trying to save her teenage daughter from sex trafficking. In 2015, her daughter started working at a now closed store in Chinatown. According to the commission, Judge Tobiason believed Shane Valentine, a violent felon, was running a prostitution ring out of the place, and she told the I-Team she staked it out.
I spent hours. I mean, I would go, I would watch, I would get license plate numbers, I would get makes and models of cars, I would follow people, I would get information about where they would go, where they lived, where they, I never used inappropriate means to get information. I did it all myself.
In 2016, Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kaufman were murdered. According to the commission, Judge Tobiason stated she believed Valentine committed the murders, and she connected with Sidney Land's mother with burner phones, her code name Master of Puppets. The commission states Tobiason also connected with a woman she believed was involved in the murder. Once Metro believed the judge was interfering with the investigation, Metro started tracking her phones. And according to the department, police learned she had over 1,000 communications over 5 months with an organized crime figure who she had previously dismissed charges against in her courtroom. Police say she also later communicated with him while he was a fugitive. During her interview with the I-Team, Judge Tobiason admitted at times she turned to pimps and prostitutes for information instead of police.
The problem is I don't think we're in danger from the pimps anymore. I'm more afraid of the vice detectives and those who are trying to cover this up. That's what I'm afraid of now.
The commission is expected to hold a hearing. Attorney Dominic Gentile told me Tuesday night he is representing Judge Tobiason and he did not provide a statement. Vanessa Murphy, 8 News Now.
And after that initial interview with Judge Tobiason in 2018, Metro Police responded with a statement. One of the judge's concerns was the Vice Unit protecting pimps, which was investigated by the FBI. Sheriff Joe Lombardo has insisted the Vice Unit has been cleaned up. You can find that at 8newsnow.com. Pushing for oversight. Up next, the congressional report showing billions of dollars in fraud, waste, and illegal filings in the Paycheck Protection Program loans. Plus,
I'm Morgan Reid in Washington. Coming up, the clock is ticking for lawmakers to avoid a government shutdown. How they plan to tackle that
9, only on 8 News Now. You're watching Politics Now.
A new report is out detailing how COVID-19 is disproportionately affecting communities of color in Nevada. The Hispanic community remains the hardest hit. Joe Mueller gives us a look at the report.
A 32-page report from the Gwynn Center, a nonpartisan policy center, shows how the pandemic is taking a toll on communities of color.
Latinos account for the majority of COVID-19 cases. The hospitalization rate for African Americans in Clark County is higher, and then the COVID-19 mortality rate is higher for African Americans and Asians.
Nancy Brune is the executive director. Healthcare access, lack of insurance, and underlying health issues are top contributing factors. Of
the folks who don't have insurance here in Nevada, Latinos account for 60% of that population. So overall, about 20% of Latinos don't have health insurance.
She says people of color tend to work in industries directly impacted by the virus.
Building services, cleaning, grocery store workers.
Cecilia Alvarado from Mi Familia Volta is helping with the Está en Tus Manos campaign to bring awareness to the Hispanic community. She says fear is a big problem.
We come from mixed status families. Some of those families, if they have someone undocumented, they have the fear of coming forward to get tested.
The report lists solutions such as more education, rental assistance, and more testing.
They don't always have the option to call in sick. They don't always have the option to say, I'm going to show up to work late today. So they have to choose between continue to provide to their families or possibly going to get tested.
Joe Mueller, 8 News Now.
To see the entire report, click on this story on our website, 8newsnow.com. It's September, which means it's that time of year where we start counting down to a potential government shutdown on October 1st. The federal government runs out of money at the end of the month. When Congress returns next week, it'll have just a few weeks to agree on a new funding plan. Washington, D.C. correspondent Morgan Wright reports on efforts to find common ground.
In Washington, the clock is ticking to avoid a government shutdown.
We're going to have just a few weeks before the October 1 deadline, and it's unfortunately unlikely that we'll get all of our appropriation bills done.
Maryland Senator Ben Cardin says he expects Congress to pass a continuing resolution to keep the government up and running, but he doesn't consider that a success.
Continuing resolution is a failure, not as great as the failure of letting government shut down, but it's not where we need to be.
Cardin says besides avoiding a shutdown, a continuing resolution doesn't address the new realities government agencies face in the pandemic.
And you're freezing the current year's budget into the next year. You're not establishing the priorities that are needed.
Negotiations over government funding come as the coronavirus continues to spread. Some lawmakers say funding the government and the next COVID relief package should go hand in hand. New York Congressman Tom Reed.
Both of them have to be done, in my humble opinion. And so we might as well take care of both packages at the same time.
Reed says at a minimum, lawmakers should pass a continuing resolution to avoid additional harm to the American people.
The country's going through enough. It doesn't need the drama of Washington, D.C. To add to it.
Lawmakers return to the nation's capital after the Labor Day holiday. Reporting in Washington, I'm Morgan Wright.
The last U.S. federal government shutdown started on December 22, 2018 and lasted 35 days. It was the longest U.S. government shutdown in history. A small business group is suing the Trump administration for the names of all businesses that got Paycheck Protection Program loans and the exact amounts. The American Small Business League says so far, Americans have little information or transparency about how the money was spent. Lloyd Chapman is the organization's president.
Publicly traded companies on the New York Stock Exchange and billionaires getting this money.
Congress is starting to look into who received those loans as well. John Langler talked with our Washington, D.C. bureau correspondent Alexandra Limon about it.
Alexandra, let's talk about some of these problems. What are they talking about on Capitol Hill to try and deal with this?
Yeah, there's actually a brand new congressional investigation looking into PPP loans that was released just this week. And what those lawmakers found was about $1 billion in potentially fraudulent PPP loans. The reason is that these Democratic House members say that some businesses obtained more than one PPP loan, and that is actually a violation of the program's rules. And they they say those loans, those duplicate loans, totaled about $1 billion. So that is one big problem right there. But this congressional investigation actually uncovered a long list of other potential problems with the PPP loans. For example, they say there were hundreds of applications for PPP loans that didn't have any names or addresses on the applications, and they were still approved. So lawmakers say in some of these cases, we don't even really know who that money went to. Now, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin was grilled about this issue in a hearing this week on Capitol Hill, and what he said was that any PPP loan that is worth more than $2 million will be audited, and any loan that was smaller than that can possibly be audited. And Democrats were pretty unhappy with that answer because they're concerned that that means that a majority of these PPP loans will never get looked at.
Considering the speed behind getting the PPP off the ground, the amount of money involved, are lawmakers surprised that there's been this level of fraud, there's been this level of sort of lost money essentially with such an enormous program?
Well, I don't know if they're truly surprised, because you're right, these loans and this program was approved so quickly, but these lawmakers certainly do act like they're surprised. They say that this shouldn't be happening, and they certainly seem outraged, but it is a good question, whether anyone can really be surprised, because, those loans were approved so quickly, and in fact now Congress is trying to approve a third round of possible PPP loans.
That was Alexandra Limon reporting from Washington, D.C.